Welcome to Foundation Repair Success Secrets, the podcast that's rocking the foundation repair industry. Discover how to boost your leads, raise your profits, and lift your digital presence. Together, let's dig deep and transform your foundation repair business.
We have a part two. We got Jason on the podcast. Jason, how's it going?
Good. How you doing?
I am doing good. Jason, this is kind of cool. Before we get into the crazy technicalities and very intricate web of your world in this industry, I think something that was really awesome. I hope you don't mind that I share this, but before the podcast, you were telling me some stuff about kind of for sales team members, for owners, maybe not delving so much into the news and these different things. Can you just give us like a little slice of that? Because I thought that was pretty insightful to the extent that you view that.
Well, I mean, first of all, on that, when I've trained salespeople, because sales is all mental. Yeah, there is some physical to it, but it's mainly mental stuff. And when I got a sales rep that's in a rut, and he's in a rut that he can't get out of, and he needs my help, I get to the point sometimes where I say, you know what, we need to make a change. And it could be anything. And I had one guy, he's like, I don't even know what to do. I go, you know what you can start with is getting a new coffee cup, because that thing looks about 5 years old. Okay, you can start with that, and then we'll go from there. But the one thing that talk about what you brought up about the media, and people are going to disagree with me, of course, on this. It's all negative. It's negative Nancy everything.
When it bleeds, it leads.
When did they get on there and say, hey, the economy is fantastic, housing, is so great right now, you can get a lot of money for selling your house? You don't hear that. It's all the other stuff. It's all negative, everything. And for a salesperson, because our job is so mental, that is it's like being preached to you and just ingraining and twisting and screwing into your brain this negative thing. And then what happens is, and you don't think it really is affecting you, subconsciously it is, and you get into your sales appointment, and let's say a customer says something about, oh man, did you see that debate last night? And automatically it triggers in your head, yeah, it is really bad right now. And then you start getting to the point where, oh man, this guy, he has no money, he's poor and this and that, and he's not going to spend $30,000 on his basement or crawl space to fix it, and it's all this negative stuff. And I'm going to tell you right now, 2008, we know what happened in 2008 with the housing market. Everything was crashing. And in my industry, everything is going down, okay? In most industries. Guess what? That was my record year.
Oh, wow.
I doubled the year before. And I have guys that are reps with me. I'm just a normal sales rep at this point. And they're like, what are you doing out there? What, it's so bad out there. How are you doubling it and setting company records? My boss, a 1% bonus. He goes, if you could beat the company record, I'll give you 1% bonus of all your sales. Beat it. He goes, if you do it again and break your own record. I did it 4 times in a row. This is in 2008. Okay. Wow. I believe it's because of my mindset and beliefs, because I do not watch the news. You could ask my family. I do not watch the news. I do not listen to talk radio. I mean, we're on a podcast right now, but I don't listen to any of those guys. I don't even know what's going on out there, and I don't even care. I had a customer last week that we did a job for. He goes, man, things are kind of bad out there. And in my head, I'm like, I have no idea what you're talking about. I think they're great. Right. Everything's great. So you got to have that mindset. Everything's great. There's not a problem. And if you're sucking into this news thing, just stop. Just stop watching it. It's so negative. There's nothing good about it. Nothing. Tell me what's good about the news where it made you feel upbeat. Like you just went to a seminar, a sales seminar, and the guys get you all fired up. No, not the media. So, I mean, that's my little rant on that. We could go on and on about that, but yeah, it's mindset and belief in sales, and you got to be positive. You got to be on it all the time.
Yeah, love it. Yeah, it's interesting. It's good for our audience, whether it's the owners, whether it's the sales team. I don't even care if it's production, anything like that. It's very interesting. So,
yeah.
Figured
yeah.
we'd start things off with that because that was kind of cool. Now let's jump into some of these other technicals. That's a brain technical and a lifestyle technical.
Yeah.
Really, I know some of the stuff you obviously have a lot of wisdom in the space, and you want to share it, which is exciting too. Some people kind of want to keep it to themselves. Oh, this is a secret. This is the stuff I know. We'll keep it internal.
Yeah.
Something we
Right.
wanted to talk about was foundation walls. Them bowing. Just kind of break that down. Foundation walls in general.
Well, foundation walls blowing inward is something that's always going on, always will go on. And I say to my customers, as long as they build basements into the earth, it's going to be happening no matter what they do. And codes have changed and they're putting rebar in and they're putting concrete and this and that. They're still bowing in. And some of the worst foundations are block foundations. Now, in the Cincinnati area, 85% of our foundations are solid poured concrete walls. They are the best foundation wall to this date. Block foundations, they're about 5-10%, and then you have the stone foundations of the old 1900s, early 1900s. In Columbus, where I was born at and where I'm from, it's the opposite. 85% of the houses are block foundations up there. And then it's like 10% for poured and the other 5 is stone. So we fix those every day. I went to leads every single day, every week, every year on block foundations, walls bowing in. And it may be 1 wall, 2 walls, 3 walls, all the time we're seeing it. So I got a tremendous amount of experience with these bowing walls. But block is the worst because they're the weakest. They're 8-inch block. They're very seldom 12-inch block. And the 8-inch block, the hollows inside the block, which there's generally 2 hollows per block. A block is 16 inches wide, 8 inches tall, and 8 inches thick. The hollows are 5 by 5 inches. So if the math, there's only 3 inches of concrete that's really supporting the wall. You got 1.5 inches, and then you got the 5-inch hollow, and then you got another 1.5 inches in the face. And I know there's a divider in the middle, but still, a solid concrete wall is solid 8 inches thick from top to bottom, the whole thickness of the wall. Clearly, that's way stronger than block. But we do poured walls that are bowing in also. And it doesn't have to be on a hillside in Cincinnati. We get, we're on the Ohio River, and we got a good sized hill going down to the river. It's on flatland. Columbus is super flat. There is no hill. And we had poured walls that were bowing in there. So, brick foundations, they of course bow in. We just fixed the stone foundation wall that was 5 inches bowed in. We did that a couple months ago. So it's all of them, but it's block. I mean, that's number one thing.
Got it. Now, how about some of the remedies that you guys maybe prescribe? Is there one way and that's it that you guys go by? Are there multiple? Okay.
No, I mean, there's really 5 different ways to structurally repair a foundation wall. There is a 6th one, but no, I don't do it because it kind of works. And the 5 is you either rebuild the foundation wall brand new. Of course, that's going to be the best because you got a brand new wall. But the downside is it's the most expensive. You have to fully excavate your house down. And trying to excavate the wall down 1 foot or 2 or 3 and rebuild the wall, no, that's not the right way. You got to go all the way down to the footer. You have to support the house on the inside. You have to lift it up a little bit to get the weight off the foundation wall. You have to tear it down, and you're looking out to the outside from the basement, build a brand new wall. The mistake that most of these contractors do who do wall rebuilds is they do not reinforce the wall on the inside. They put rebar in every 4 feet and they fill in the cavity every 4 feet with rebar because that's what code requires now. And guess what? The wall still bows in. And they don't give warranties for it. They give you a taillight warranty. As soon as they pull away, boom, the warranty's gone. Maybe 1 year, but they're not giving lifetime stuff. So that's one option. The second option is to do a wall dig and push, where you excavate the wall out and you keep the existing wall and you actually press it back to its original position. And again, people do these the wrong way, where they push the wall back, they backfill, and they say, yep, you'll never have a problem with this wall again. And sure enough, the people are calling me up in 10 years and are like, we had this wall dug out and pushed back, by Bob, the excavator, and it's recracking again. And he said he put, a couple feet of gravel on the outside. I should never have a problem. I'm like, did you get a warranty for that? He goes, no, I didn't get a warranty. What? And you have to structurally reinforce the wall on the inside if you're doing a wall push. If you're doing a rebuild, we used to do carbon fiber on the wall, and it was a brand new wall. And we did the rebar every 4 feet and filled up with concrete and put the carbon fiber in between each one of those rebars. So basically every 2 feet we had a support system, and we gave lifetime warranties. So now you're down to the 3 real options of supporting the foundation wall, because I tell my customers, do you really have to rebuild the wall? Do you really have to excavate and push it back? And the majority of the time, you do not. If you want to do those things, we can do them. But in the rule of thumb with that is, when your wall has an internal measurement of about 4 inches or more, you really should be excavating the wall out and at least pushing it back, if not rebuilding it. But there's so many different circumstances. I mean, if the blocks are breaking apart and all that stuff, you're going to need to rebuild it. And then under 4 inches, you can actually save the wall and stabilize it. So your 3 main options are what everybody knows. It's been around for 100 years. It's steel I-beams. The ones that I use are a 13-pound I-beam. They weigh 13 pounds every foot. They're 4 inch by 4¼ inches. They weigh about 100 pounds each beam in a basement, an 8-foot beam. We do them every 4 feet. Depending on the situation, we may do them less, spreading them out much further than that. Yes, we can go 4.5, 5 foot, but some of these contractors are spreading these beams like 6, 7, 8. I've seen like 10 feet. I'm like, you gotta be kidding me. You're spreading them that far apart. It is working against it, and it's going to bow in between those. So we don't do that. We do it the right way. Another thing that's going on in the industry right now is the cost of steel since COVID has doubled. And what the contractors are doing to offset that is they're going to a smaller size beam, because steel is priced by the pound. So these contractors are doing 7.75 pound I-beams. It weighs half of what I use, and they're paying half the money. So that's how they offset and justify the price difference by keeping the price the same. And the customer has no idea. Most people have no idea. Oh, they're putting beams up. And it could be 2 feet by 2 foot or a little 1 by 1. They're like, they're doing beams. They're supporting the wall, and they don't understand. So I've always used 13-pound I-beams, and I still do today. Never done anything any less. The only time I don't use 13-pound is if you have a wall that's like 10 foot tall. Again, you have leverage working against you, and you got to step up to the next size. But that's pretty rare. So steel I-beams definitely work. Everybody gets it. They understand it. And basically every structural engineer out there is like, yep, that'll work. That's what you need to do. There are adjustable I-beams that we do where you can actually torque a bolt down up in the floor joist framing to put pressure on the beam, and you can slowly move the wall back. You're not pushing it back immediately, especially with block. You'll break the hollows of the block and now have to rebuild the wall. So you have what's called a static beam that's just concreted into the basement floor or bolted and framed up into the joist, and it doesn't move inward or outward. And then you have the adjustable beam. We can get into more of that if you want to know, but the fourth option is wall anchors. Okay. And in Cincinnati, we have a lot of these because we're on hillsides, and you basically have a plate. Standard is 1 foot wide by 2 foot tall, and you put that on the foundation wall about chest high, and then you drive a rod, a 1-inch threaded rod, through the foundation wall out in the yard. And on average, I go 12 feet out from the foundation wall. You dig up, you find those rods, you put a cross plate on the outside, and it's holding the wall back. Just like if you were doing tug of war, you would have your body lean back and holding that rope. resisting the other person on the other side going the opposite way. It's like that for your foundation wall. It works. It's been around for many decades, these wall tiebacks, and we got them on in Cincinnati. You can see them on the freeway system holding back the retaining walls of the neighborhood that's like 50 feet up in the air above the freeway. There's beliefs out there, well, it only supports the wall and the area that you're putting it, and below that it's going to continue to move in, and above that it's going to continue to move in. There's little truth to that. There are circumstances where that can happen, and that's why steel beams are so attractive, because it goes the full length of the wall from the very top of the wall to the bottom. But it actually works very well, the wall anchors. We do another step up from that called channel anchors, and just depends on the situation, where they actually are about 6.5 foot tall, and they bolt to the basement floor, and you run the rod out in the yard. And those are really great. There's a lot of leverage in my favor to move a wall back just by having it bolt to the floor and having it pinned into the earth right there. But they're expensive to do. But we do them. That stone foundation wall I told you about earlier, we did a couple of those channel anchors because it was really bad in the middle of the wall. And then there's carbon fiber. We do all this stuff. Whatever you need as a homeowner, and whatever you want and what your belief is, I'm there to help you out. And when I go out to a house, first I determine how far the wall is pushed in, and at that point I educate you on your options of repair, because if the wall's bowed 3 inches, you're not using carbon fiber. People do, but my limit on carbon fiber is 2.25 inch of inward movement, and that's maxed out fiber. So carbon fiber is more of a lighter duty repair, and people look at me as like, well, I don't want a light duty repair because it's going to fail. Nope, I still give a lifetime warranty on it. So carbon fiber is awesome. It works as long as you do it correctly in the correct application and install it correctly. So, but they all have their purpose and places. And, if you want, we could get more into details of each one of these. But that's the quickie on supports.
Nice. Okay. Well, yeah, it's cool that you have multiple options. I know we talked the other day, on our episode 1, and it was kind of like for everything, some companies just have one solution, which honestly doesn't make a boatload of sense to me. Things are case by case. Things aren't always just cookie cutter. Like, I don't even understand how companies like that exist, other than ridiculous sales tactics, but that's a whole nother story. So I think that sums it up pretty well. So crawl spaces, fun, crazy, messy, nasty crawl spaces. Obviously encapsulation's a big thing. Trying to make sure that some crawl spaces are just under the house, some are like attached where there's like a basement area type thing, and the crawl space, you can see it right there. Let's dig in, give a few minutes on crawl spaces and maybe some of the solutions that you guys have for them. First off, for anyone who's listening, what the heck is a crawl space? What do they look like? What are the different varieties of them? And then what are some of the solutions that you guys provide to best handle or utilize a crawl space?
Well, a basement is obviously something you can stand up in, usually, unless you're in the really old houses, you're kind of hunched over. Crawl spaces is you're literally crawling in them, whether you're on your hands and knees or you're actually on your belly, army crawling. That's a crawl space. And the new builds, they're making taller. I go into them and they're 4 foot tall. Fantastic. I'm used to dealing with 2 foot tall, and they're a huge difference working in a 2-footer versus a 4-footer. A 4-footer, I'm up on my knees, completely upright, and can move around real well. A 2-footer, you can't get upright. You're army crawling basically the whole time. It's underneath your house. You generally have an outside entrance. You can have an inside entrance. Some people are like, I have no entrance in my crawl space. There's nothing. And I tell them, I go, you probably have a hidden entryway in one of the closets of the house, mainly the master bedroom. Sometimes the guest room, kids room will have it in the closet, and we pull back the carpet and there it is, the hatch. and it's in between the floor joists, and it's only 16 inches wide. Really, it's 15 and a half roughly. But, those are your entryways, and a lot of people don't go in their crawl space. They're nasty, and pretty much all of them, or they will be. It's all time on that. But man, these things, I was just in one today before this morning. I had a 9 o'clock appointment, and it had multiple additions. Older house, built in the 40s, had 2 additions put onto it. I go in there, and the guy's like, man, my floors are really, they're sagging, and look at my bathtub. It's going, it's tilted. And I'm like, totally. And I go down there, and whoever built this, first of all, they used 2x6s as the joists. Well, the minimum really should be 2x8s, and most houses are 2x10s. It had 2x6s, and then I went to the second edition, and they used 2x4s for the joists, 2x4s. And on top of that, your normal span in between joists is 16 inches. They did 24-inch span. So it's one thing if you have a 24-inch span and you're using 2x8s, 2x10s. They use 2x4s on a 24-inch span. No kidding, is he having floor problems? It's standing on pencils. So, this guy, he needed $35,000 worth of just foundation work. Wow. And the issue with just doing foundation work in a crawl space is not only was this one built incorrectly, most crawl spaces aren't built like that. They usually have 2x8s or 2x10s as joists, but the environment of the crawl space is killing the crawl spaces and all the wood. I go in the crawl spaces all the time, and anybody who does this industry can tell you this 100%, that the crawl space is 70, 75, 80, 85% humidity. I'm seeing that all the time, if not 90, 95%. And I've seen crawl spaces so humid that it's literally a cave in there. It's dripping water everywhere.
Wow.
That
that's crazy.
I mean, it's a cave. It really is a cave. I mean, I've seen the white stuff. I forget what they call that in a cave, where it drips down and it keeps adding on to itself. I have seen that in crawl spaces. Man. And people think these crawl spaces are like no man's land. Like it's the outside. It's not part of your house. 40% of the air you breathe is from your crawl space. It's called the stack effect. Every house is built this way, whether it's 150 years old to present. It sucks the air from your crawl space. It goes up to the first floor, second floor, up to the attic. And that's why you have ridge vents in the attic, also for the attic, but it blows the air out of the ridge vents of the attic. So we are siphoning that moisture from a crawl space and humidity into the wood joists first, and then up into your house. And then the wood is organic, so mold has it's a mold farm down there. It's a perfect environment for mold. You got the humidity, you got the moisture, you got organic materials. Cellulose is the candy for mold. Cellulose is wood. Drywall has a ton of cellulose in it. This is why drywall gets moldy real quick when you have a wet basement and it's finished. So those environments are terrible. And a lot of crawl spaces, especially the worst crawl spaces, are ranch homes with full crawl spaces. They don't have a partial basement and partial crawl space. They're full crawl spaces. They're the worst. They're the ones we're always fixing for $30, $40, $50,000 all the time. There's so much surface area. They leak water. They have all the humidity, moisture. They got everything working against them. So, I mean, there is so much I could talk about the crawl spaces. There's so many different avenues. And the great thing that I do is I do basically everything for crawl spaces. We just finished a crawl space yesterday that the main beam was sagging. It was rotted out, and it wasn't just termites. It was the environment of the crawl space that did it, the moisture. And we ripped the whole 27-foot beam out built a brand new one, put it in, poured footers, did adjustable galvanized steel post. We sistered floor joists because floor joists were sagging, broke, and cracked. We did a sump pump system and some other stuff. And the guy called me yesterday. He's like, man, he goes, you guys were fantastic. You lifted my floors up. I had gaps everywhere. Everything's hard, firm, straight, no gaps anymore. Your guys were amazing. I can't believe it. You put my faith back into contractors, because he had a very, very, very bad taste at contractors. He was very hesitant because they've had so many bad experiences with contractors. And he's like, I'm so glad I had you fix it for me for multiple reasons. So we're doing them all the time. These crawls, they're bad. So I don't know if you want to hear anything else, any more details on that, but there's a lot of different ways I could go down about crawl spaces.
Yeah, it's amazing. Give us, just a few minutes about solutions that you guys utilize.
Well, we believe in doing things in steps. There's a wrong order and there's the correct order. And our level one is any foundation stuff that needs to be done really should be handled first, whether it's the joist, the main beam, supports put in, supplement supports to hold the floor joist in the middle that are sagging, foundation settling needs to be piered, whatever, even walls bowing in. That happens in crawl spaces too, even though the wall is only 3-4 foot tall, they do bow in. That should be done first. The second stage is putting a sump pump in the crawl space, because they basically hardly ever have them. But a sump pump by itself is not really the correct way to fix a crawl space. It's really a flood prevention to keep you from having a foot of water down there. And yes, that happens a lot in these crawl spaces, these ranch homes. What you really need to do is stage 2 and 3 together, where you do the sump system, the sump pit, and you do a perimeter drain system, a footer drain that's perforated with gravel around it to collect the water around all the entry points around the perimeter and take the water to the sump pump. People think that they're going to waterproof their crawl space just by putting a sump pump in. Nope, doesn't work, never will. You got to get the water from one end to the other, to the sump, and the drainage is the way to do it. So now you got the basement or the crawl space structurally reinforced. Now you have it so no water is stagnant in there and flooding, but you still have the moisture from the earth, the humidity, condensation, that's all still there. And one big enemy for this is they put those stupid vents in the crawl space, and they still do it today. And they're a 16-inch wide by 8-inch tall vent. Typically, they always have at least 2 of them. And it's the old way of thinking, and people are going to fight me on this even today. And they're going to say, well, you got to get fresh air in there. You got to get fresh air, just like upstairs. You got to open your windows up every once in a while, get that fresh air in your house. Okay, great. Let's talk about that. In Arizona, makes sense. The humidity is 18, 19, 20%. I don't see much of a problem letting that fresh air get in that crawl space and get the bad air out. But in Ohio, no, that doesn't happen. The humidity, maybe in the wintertime, our humidity is 25, 30%. Most of the year, it's 70, 80, 90% humidity. And you're sucking that humid air into your crawl space, plus it's hot. Your crawl space is underground, so it's already cooler. Think about it. In the summertime, you go down your basement, it's nice and comfortable. In the wintertime, It's cold.
Right.
And you get condensation happening because the hot humid air is hitting the colder environment in the crawl space. And usually when I explain to people like that, they're like, okay, that makes sense to me. So they're bad, the vents. The problem is that if you close up the vents now, you are stopping the fresh air from coming in. And if you don't do anything else, you will cause a mold problem in that crawl space, because it's stagnant air that's just sitting there, because your crawl space isn't connected to your HVAC system. Your HVAC is going to pull the air out of each room in your house and condition it with either heat or air conditioned, cooled air, but it's not in your crawl space. So it just sits there. And that bad stagnant air is like stagnant water just sitting there. It's not good. So to truly close off your vents, you need to encapsulate the crawl space. And the
Yep.
encapsulation is like a swimming pool liner. The one I use is 20 mil. It's really the thickest that is out there. The problem I have with encapsulation right now is everybody's using the word just like they do organic. People, they see organic and they're like, it must be good. It's organic. Everybody's using the word and abusing it. And I go to customers' houses and I walk in the door and the first thing they say to me is, we had our crawl space encapsulated. And in my head, I'm like, oh no, I already know what this means. And in my head, I'm like, well, then why am I even out here?
Right.
And they're all proud that they had something done in their crawl space and they spent like $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 on it. But they know there's something not quite right. And I go down there. I'm back a little teeny thing and I can see the earth back there. I can stick my body in there. It's not sealed at all whatsoever. Vapor barriers, yeah, that's great. All your home inspectors are saying you got to do a vapor barrier. Half the time they don't even know why. They're just telling you because that's what their boss told them that needs to be done in every crawl space. A vapor barrier is like heating and air conditioning your house and leaving your basement windows or your windows open in your house year round. Would you ever do that? Heat your house, spend money on heating the house, spend money cooling the house, and leave your windows and doors open? No, nobody's going to do that. That's what a vapor barrier does. The moisture and humidity just goes right around it and still gets into the crawl space. It's stupid. I don't do vapor barriers. I'm not wasting people's money, even though it's cheaper. I could do them. I could do them for like $1,500. I'm not doing it because it's not the right thing to do for people. Encapsulation is. And once you do that encapsulation, you now can close up those vents permanently. But a mistake, even though it's encapsulated, you got to do a dehumidifier in the crawl space after it's encapsulated. And that's stage, encapsulation is stage 4 for us, and dehumidifier is stage 5. And they really need to be done together, the dehumidifier and encapsulation. And then there's 2 more stages after that, doing battery backups and second sump pumps and doing insulation in the crawl space. So, we could get into, hone in on each one of those things. But encapsulation works, and there's still people out there that believe that it doesn't work, and it does. And in our industry, we've been doing it since the late 80s, the encapsulation. And all the municipalities back then, they're like, you're going to destroy these houses. They're going to be mold farms and they're going to be falling down. And here we are. And they're not. We saved the home. And everybody jumping on the bandwagon now, and starting to do them, now. And the cities are like, they're like 30, 40 years behind, where we're at in the industry. They still don't know. So it works. They're awesome.
That's awesome. Love it. Well, and it's cool too that you guys have the stages, the levels, where it's prescriptive. It's not necessarily like, oh, we just jump to this or we jump to that. And you guys have a hierarchy, and it's something visually that people can kind of grasp onto. So yeah, that sounds awesome. Well, that's a touch on crawl spaces real quick here. We wanted to touch on, piers. Let's talk about when to use piers. Obviously, a lot of our audience will know this. Of course, when a building's kind of slouching, sagging, sinking, etc. So when piers are needed, maybe some crazy examples of how many piers you've had to use in certain cases where you just had to throw a bunch of them at a certain project or building, types of piers, etc. So let's jump in on those.
Yeah, piers are one of the most expensive ways to repair a foundation other than rebuilding foundation walls. And this is another problem in the industry, is that because they're expensive, contractors are spanning the piers too far apart. And they're doing like 8-10 foot apart. Nope. I mean, if you got a footer that's huge, if you got a footer that's like 2 foot tall, I mean, it's huge. You probably could do that, and it, would probably be okay. I still wouldn't do it that way. We put our piers every 5 foot.
Okay.
And when you're at a corner, you need to do 2.5 foot from each side of the corner. So it's basically 5 foot there too. But you don't start 5 foot from the corner and put your first pier. You do 2.5 foot really max. And sometimes we put the pier on the corner. It just depends on the situation. There's a lot of variables. It used to be 20 years ago, 6 foot was the average spacing on piers. But it is definitely better at 5. And of course, 4 would be better than 5, and 3 would be better than 4. But there's a certain point where it's unrealistic and really not necessary. 5 foot's that sweet spot of where you want to be for piers. And again, depends on how big the footer is too. If it's a smaller footer, and we've done them where the footer is only 6 inches tall, you definitely got to have here at 5 foot spacing, if not 4 foot. But the average footer is 8 inches tall, and it's great at 5 foot. Yeah, I mean, there's just so many avenues to go down with piers, but I'm assuming people know what a pier is and how they're installed, or maybe you want me to talk about that briefly.
Yeah, we could briefly hit on that. That's fine.
So the piers are, a lot of people think piers are concrete, and those are really called caissons, or piles, where you core a hole into the earth and you pour concrete in there. And this is what they basically do on new builds. And they fail. The true piers in our industry that we're talking about is steel piers. And we dig down to the footer. We prep the footer, which there's a lot of talk about with that. We have a bracket that is L-shaped that goes underneath the footer and on the side of it. So it'd just be like if you were going to pick up your kitchen table today, you'd put your hands underneath it to pick it up. You wouldn't put your hand on the side of it to try to pick it up. It'd be a lot harder. And then the pier itself is a post that is driven into the ground. And once you drive that pier to the appropriate depth, it is attached to the pier bracket. You put some bolts, nuts on it, threaded rods and nuts, and then you actually can lift the foundation up and tighten everything down and close up cracks and open doors again that don't open up anymore. And people really get excited when you get done piering their house and you lift it up. I mean, they're like, I haven't been able to open up that basement door for 5 years, and now I can. And my bedroom door, I had to kick it to open it and shut it, and now it's so smooth. And they're really ecstatic, and that makes me really happy when a customer is that cheerful when they see the results instantly. So that's but it's great. So there's 2 types of piers. There's a helical pier and there's a push pier. And here we go. We're gonna have a big debate about this. Okay.
Bring it on. Let's see.
We can talk about this in depth too. A push pier is pushed into the ground with a hydraulic press. And this is what I do the majority of the time as a push pier. A helical pier is screwed into the ground. And the analogy is that it's just like if you were going to put 2 pieces of wood together, you can take a nail and hammer it in straight, or you could take a screw and screw it into the wood. And contractors who only do helical piers and bash push piers, they're saying, well, doesn't it make sense? Isn't it better and stronger that you screw into the wood instead of nailing a nail into it that will separate? And yes, that is true for wood, but for piers, it's a vertical load. It's completely different, and both piers work. They do. Helical piers will pretty much work in every situation. Push piers don't work in every situation, but most. And where the helical piers really shine over the push piers is very light structures, like a front stoop. a little patio that's sinking down the ground. It's like 6 by 6 foot that goes up to your front door. It's really not where you want to do a push pier. The helical piers is better suited for that. But if you got a ranch home with brick, even siding, you got 2-story house, 3-story old school, all brick, absolutely push pier is fantastic for that. And a helical pier will work as well. But I have actually re-piered foundations that have already been piered with helicals, and they're failed. And I had to go out there and do push piers to fix it the right way.
Wow.
The
Couldn't
big,
imagine being the customer on that.
yeah. And the worst thing
That
about it,
stinks.
the contractor told the customer he went out there 2 years. He went out to the first year because the customer called him. This is just one customer I had in Kentucky. And he's like, well, that's just normal cracking you're having. That's going to happen. Had him out this following year. He goes, listen, this isn't normal cracking. It's actively moving. And the guy's like, looked at it and he goes, yeah, I'm not going to fix that for you. And he gave him a warranty. And he told him he wasn't going to fix it. I mean, this is the stuff that goes on out there in the industry. It's crazy. And he got away with it. The guy didn't do anything to him about it. And it's like, this is nuts. So we go out there and we drove these push piers 86 feet deep in the ground. We did 14 of them.
Ooh.
Now that's not normal. On average, we go about 12 to 21 feet. But that's the problem with the helical pier is there is no way you're going 85 feet deep in the ground. And I'll have somebody out there saying, well, we've gone 85 feet deep in the ground with the helical. What, one time out of 20 years you did? Okay, it's not, you're not in our clay soil in Ohio. It's not happening. There's too much resistance in the clay soil. You'll break your equipment, the head of your driver, to drive those helical piers. And the biggest problem with why houses are settling is the soil. Yes, water can make it settle. Yes. But the number one reason is the soil. And I'm not talking about, people are led to believe that the soil right underneath the footer is what's bad. Nope. It can be, yes. But the majority of the time, it's the soil deeper. And we don't know if it's 3 foot, 10 foot, 20 feet, 30 feet deep in the ground. If that soil is moving around at 30 feet depth, everything above it moves down to that point. So with the helical pier, especially in our clay soil, you're driving these things like 6 feet deep in the ground, maybe a little bit more, and you're still in that soil range that's above the bad soil at 30 feet deep. And this is why this guy still had movement, because the helical piers didn't surpass all the bad soils. And we had to surpass them all. And it was 85, 86, 87 feet very consistently with all 14 of those piers. You're not driving that deep with helical. And that's why I like to do push piers, because I have to surpass all the bad soils. And I know when I do that, that place isn't moving.
Solid. Yeah. All right. Well, we heard the real crazy depth on that one with 14 piers. Any other like a crazy amount of piers needed or crazy amount of depth that comes to mind that was just an insane project? I've heard hotels and motels and things where it was just a vast array of piers. Any massive ones that are noteworthy?
Well, honestly, I'm not doing commercial like that. I'm basically 99% residential. There's so much work needs to be done residential. I'm just not there yet for commercial. I'm not built for that yet. I mean, truthfully, but there's a time for that, and I don't need it to be now. I'm busy enough with residential, so I will be saving those places in the future. It's just not right now. But I haven't done them personally. I've done commercial, with past company that I work with, and with commercial buildings, yeah, they're super heavy, but you start to get into a bigger size diameter pier, because a standard pier is 3 to 4 inches around, but those babies, I mean, we're talking, you're talking like a foot around, even
Oof.
bigger for those piers, and that takes completely different equipment to drive that thing, to do those. So I'm not as experienced with commercial, just because I haven't done them, a whole lot of them. So probably not the best person to ask for commercial, but residential, I could talk to you all day long about.
Awesome. Okay. Sweet. Well, yeah, I mean, that rounds things out pretty well. I guess we'll talk real quickly on the depth clause that we had, kind of offline the other day. Would
Yeah.
love your opinion and thoughts on that for the audience. And then I think we can cap this baby off.
Yeah. Yeah. Depth clause. This is getting better in the industry. But the depth clause is, you don't know how deep you're going to go when you drive these piers. Like the guy went 80, 85, 86 feet deep in the ground. I had no idea. Nobody does. Now, the one way to have a better idea is to get a soil sample test done by a engineer. And basically that's like in Antarctica, when they do the core test in the ice, and they pull that out and they go, a couple 100 feet deep, and they could tell you, everything about it, the age and all that stuff, and what was in there. You do that for your property, and that engineer will tell you, yeah, at this point of your house, the soil was clay, but then we reached 22 feet and it got a little silty. And then past that, it reached a blah, blah, blah clay density, whatever. Okay. I don't care. Because to get that done on your property is like $5,000 to $6,000. And what's it tell me? Okay. It tells me the depth, the majority of the area is bad at this point. I got to surpass that. It's helpful information, but I tell my customers, you don't need it. Take the $5,000 to $6,000 that costs and put it towards the actual repair, because I'm going to know how deep I'm going to go when I drive my pier. But everybody has this depth clause usually, because the average depth, again, I go is 12 feet to 21 feet. And the better companies will have in their contract, our pier depth max is 21 feet. Beyond that, we have a depth clause where it's going to cost you more money every foot we go past that 21 feet. Some contractors have 12, and some of them don't even have a depth clause on there at all. And they're super shady, and they come back in the back end and they're ripping homeowners' heads off with a back charge that they had no idea about. I have no depth clause at all whatsoever. That guy that I went 85, 86, 87 feet on 14 piers, I had to call my manufacturer and have 2 pallets of posts get delivered to me immediately, because we're in the middle of the job. And the homeowner was like, wow, Jason, I'm so glad I went with you, because it didn't cost them a penny more. It cost me 100%. And it wasn't just the material cost. On average, we drive down a pier. It takes about an hour to drive down into the ground. Those ones were taking 3 hours. So it was tripling my labor, basically.
Wow.
So contractors know that this is a problem, and they have in their mind, we can't afford to go past 21 feet. We have to have a depth clause because our piers are too expensive to do, and the labor and all that stuff I just told you about. Well, I get it. There's some truth to that. But at the end of the day, if we did an average for the whole year, because I've done it for 20 years, it really comes out to be the same average wise, because I've done piers that go down 4 feet deep or 6 feet, and you hit bedrock or whatever, and it lifts right up the house, and you don't have to go 12 feet. And it averages out about 12 to 21 feet. So you're at the end of the year, you're within that spec. So don't be stupid as an owner and saying that I can't afford to go that 85 feet like Jason did. I just can't afford it. Yeah, you can. You're thinking small-minded. You're being close-minded about that. You can do it. And now there are contractors now that are providing that no depth clause, and that's the right thing to do. You shouldn't, because I call it spiking the job. The the sales rep doesn't say anything about the depth clause. The homeowner doesn't read the back of the contract really, because it's usually back there. The foreman gets
Right.
out the job, they install the whole project, they lift the house up, they backfill, they come to the door and say, okay, we're ready to collect. The homeowner's happy because they see the correction, and then they go, oh yeah, you owe us $6,000. The homeowner's like, what are you talking about? I already paid.
Mm,
What's $6,000? Like, oh, we went past our depth clause. We had to go extra 10 feet on 10 piers. It's X amount of dollars per foot, and that's how we came up to the extra $6,000 you owe us. And it's this debate and switch, and people are PO'd, to say the least, when that happens to them.
right. As they should be.
Yeah, and what are you going to do as a homeowner? Like, even if they told you that as they're driving the piers, they're already 3/4 of the way done with the project. What are you going to do? Tell them, stop everything, get off my property and out of my house, and you're left with this partially done. You're going to get somebody else in there like me to fix it? I'm going to tell you that I'm like, I can't trust what was done. I probably don't use that same manufacturer for piers, and my equipment won't work on it, and I got to redo everything.
Right.
The homeowner is trapped usually. And the homeowner's like, well, I'm going to sue that company. I appreciate it. You should. But unfortunately, some of these companies are national companies, and one of them is $1 billion company nationwide, which is great. And are you going to be able to fight that $1 billion company in court?
Yeah.
Even if you're
for a few $1,000s too, right?
Yeah.
Doesn't make
You're
sense.
not going to win. And they know that. They got you. But usually it's your smaller contractors that are doing that, not the big companies, the big ones. Usually, not always, but it's the smaller ones. So that's the depth clause there. I don't have one. I never have. And again, I've been doing it for 20 years, and it averages out at the end of the year. Just come on, owners. Just don't have a depth clause. Do the right thing for the customer, and you'll find if you did your averages, if you actually sat down and looked at your sheets when the foreman bring it back to you and how many piers they went, how deep they went on each pier, and you average it out, you're going to be fine.
Right. Well, and there's got to be a lot of distaste from a consumer standpoint. Like everything went great, but then it's totally ruined at that point when they get the bill. Do you notice that a lot of either foremen or production side team members are disclosing to people at some point, or are they normally hitting them at the end?
That's the other end that's happening in the industry, is the foremen are afraid to bring it up to the customer by what they think the customer is going to react on, which the customer should be PO'd. Or they had an experience where the customer did rip their head off and kick them off their property and talk to, management or whatever it was. So the foreman will decide on his own to stop at 21 feet.
Okay.
Well, foreman, we're only at, a couple 1,000 pounds of pressure. It will be all right. We'll be fine here. We're just stopping. And he makes the decision. Everybody has to, do what he says because he's in charge of the project. And then he backfills and he goes, okay, sir, man, everything's great, and you got a warranty, and then that's it. He collects the balance that was on the contract, not the additional, because he was afraid to say something to the customer. And all you owners out there and managers thinking that your foremen are not afraid and they're a bunch of tough dudes. Okay. Maybe you do have those guys. Yes. But don't tell me that this doesn't go through their head slightly, even a 1% chance of this going through their head. It's a negative thing, negative Nancy. So it happens and they stop, and I've seen it. And guess what? The pier fails. Sometimes it doesn't, but it can fail because they didn't get past the bad soils. Helical piers, you don't have as much of a depth clause problem because you don't have to go as deep in the ground. So it's really the push piers is that the depth clause is really the problem on. So I have seen and heard those situations where the foreman decided to stop, and it's a big mistake. And what you have to do is you have to go out there and dig it up again. And as soon as you press on that pier, the pier goes right down in the ground. And you have to keep driving until you surpass those soils. And this is a warranty issue with the customer. I mean, immediately you put that pressure on it goes right down. The foreman didn't He didn't either do his job, he didn't test it. We always test it 4 times to make sure it is in good soil. And or he stopped because he was afraid to go to the homeowner with a back charge. So owners, just do yourself a favor overall. Just don't have a depth clause. So your foreman can do the job correctly and not have to worry about back charging a customer. Just do it, right? It's just silliness for you not to do that. To have a depth clause is just silly. Small money.
Seems very awkward, the whole thing of having to approach someone when they decide to do it that route, either at the end or right when they realize things aren't going as planned. Yeah, that's awkward. The whole thing is weird. So like you're saying, it's just easier to do it your route. Awesome, man. Well, this has been super, super detailed and nice deep dive. I don't think we've ever done a part 2 on the podcast, so that's a cool kind of highlight. And then also we kind of dig around details, but now we really went into the trench of it. So super pumped, Jason. Obviously, hopefully people watch the first episode, but if they haven't, what's the website? What's the phone number? How do people get in touch with you?
Yeah, the website is healthy, like your health, healthybasementconcepts.com. You can email us anytime. You can find us on Facebook. My website is great. Phone calls are absolutely, terrific. You can call us at 513-505-8202. You can text, you can email, but phone calls I like those the best because I can have a real conversation with somebody on the phone. And right now I take all the phone calls. I talk to every single customer before I even go out there on the phone. And they have a general idea of what we could do for them before I even step foot in their house.
Awesome. Well, Jason, super happy that we got to have you on part 2. Super happy that we got to go this deep in the conversation. I think our audience will appreciate that quite a bit. And thank you for coming on the episode today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Awesome. All right, guys. Thank you so much for listening. And we will catch you on the flip side. See you guys.
Thanks for joining us today for another revealing episode of Foundation Repair Success Secrets. Don't forget to subscribe so you can keep discovering the tools, tactics, and techniques to ensure your online presence is as solid as the foundations you repair. Keep digging deep, and we'll see you in the next episode.